If you're listening to this, chances are you've told yourself the same story I did, that there's no room for you right now, that you'll get to yourself later, that this is just a season you're in. I want you to hear this clearly. Your schedule isn't the problem, and neither is your family, your job, or your responsibilities. The real issue is that you've been trying to take care of yourself only after everything else is handled, and you're learning that moment never comes. I know some of you might be surprised to hear this, but once upon a time, I found myself working 4 part-time jobs. I was a preschool teacher, I was waiting tables, I was nannying, and I was officiating girls lacrosse. In part because we needed the money, sure, but also in part because I wasn't really good at saying no to things. So I found myself in a season where I was working multiple jobs, keeping up with a toddler, all while my husband, Evan, was working out of town 80% of the year. So for anyone listening and feeling like you're living in survival mode, if your days run you instead of you running your days, if you keep telling yourself, this is just the season I'm in, I hear you. I see you, and I have been you. I lived in a reactive state for years, always feeling behind, always telling myself, there's no room for me on the plate, at least not right now, not in this season. There will be room for me when life slows down. But isn't it funny how rarely life actually slows down? Often life can feel like one dumpster fire after another. Once you get your head above water in one area, it's another pile or pipe bursting in another room. There is always something that can and will steal your time if you allow it. It is my goal today to help you take back control without feeling like you need more hours in the day, because I honestly can't promise you that. 24 hours, that's all there is, no matter which way you slice it. And half those hours, we're asleep, right? Or we should be. So knowing that I can't give you more, I want to let you guys know that I can teach you and show you how you can get the most out of the hours that you do have. Now, let's back up to the middle of all that chaos, the jobs, the toddler, the traveling husband. Even when I was telling myself this is just a season I'm in, there was still this quiet pull underneath all of that. Because here's the truth, I didn't just want life to feel less chaotic. I wanted to feel better in my own body. I wanted more energy. I wanted to recognize myself again. I needed to recognize myself again. I was so uncomfortable in my postpartum body, and I was battling what I now know to be postpartum depression. I was tired all the time. My clothes didn't fit the way they used to. I had zero confidence in who I was as a person. And I knew deep down that if I kept putting my health on the back burner, there would be worse consequences down the road, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. I didn't want to wake up one day and realize I had spent years completely disconnected from myself like I did in that moment. So the desire was there. I wanted to take care of myself. I wanted to feel strong and energized and confident again. I wanted to stop feeling like I was just surviving. But every time I tried to imagine what that would actually look like, I would hit the same wall. When? When am I supposed to do this? Where is this magical free time everyone else seems to have? Because every time I tried to create space, someone needed me. Something urgent popped up. Work demanded more. Life demanded more. And slowly that desire to change started to get buried underneath this belief that I don't actually have time for this. This isn't realistic for me right now. I'll start when life calms down. And that's where most of us women get stuck. Not because we don't care, not because we're lazy, not because we don't have any motivation, but because we genuinely believe there is no room for us in our lives right now. But as women, we aren't always so easy to just give up. So here's what we typically do instead. We start trying to find the time. And I told myself, if I really want this, I'd just figure it out. I'll wake up earlier. I'll squeeze in something while the baby naps. I'll try to be more disciplined, more efficient, more on top of things. I kept thinking if I could just organize my life better or plan harder or push myself a little more, I'd finally find the time. But here's what actually happens most of the time. Every time we try to carve out space for ourselves, something else takes priority. A kid needs you. Your husband needs some extra help. Work needs more hours. Bills need to be paid. And none of those things are bad things. They're real responsibilities and they're important things. Things that we can't just necessarily push off. So for me, every time I chose them, which was almost always, I told myself, this makes sense. This is just what the season requires. And slowly, I stopped trying. Maybe you have too. I believed the lie that there was no time left for me. And I stopped looking for the time. Because every attempt just felt like proof that this belief was true, that taking care of myself was something that I'd get to later, when life was calmer, when the kids were older, when work slowed down, when things felt more manageable. And the problem wasn't that I didn't want change badly enough. Trust me, I did, and I know you do too. The problem was that I was trying to fit myself into whatever time was left over. Which we all know there aren't really any leftovers when it comes to time, the hours, minutes, even seconds. And when you live like that long enough, when you keep squeezing yourself into whatever spaces and scraps are left, something starts to happen. In that very season, I didn't just stop trying to take care of myself. I started to pull away from my life. I was showing up physically, but emotionally and mentally, I wasn't there. I wasn't happy. I felt very disconnected, almost numb a lot of the time. And the hardest part to admit is that it wasn't just affecting me. It was affecting my marriage. It was affecting how I showed up for our young daughter. Because when you're constantly depleted, there really isn't much left to give. And through some very thoughtful prayer, I remember realizing that this wasn't just a busy season problem anymore. This was a me problem. Not because I was doing something wrong, but because I had accepted a story that said, this is just how it's going to be. And that story was slowly shrinking my life and who I was. This is why so many of us battle postpartum depression in the first place. We feel stuck, and it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel once you've been told that it's just how it is. I wasn't dreaming anymore. I wasn't thinking long term anymore. I wasn't asking what I needed anymore. I was in survival mode. I was checking boxes, just getting by. And that was the moment I knew something had to change. God laid it on my heart that this wasn't his plan for my life, nor for my family's. I wasn't okay with this being the version of me that my kids would remember. I didn't want this to be the dynamic in my marriage. And I didn't want to look back years from now and realize that I had abandoned myself in the name of being everything for everyone else, only to come up shorthanded for them in the long run. And it was right there in that moment of clarity, when I finally admitted, this can't continue. This cannot be my life forever. That's when I started looking for answers in a different way. Now, around that time, I picked up a book called Set Boundaries and Find Peace. Absolutely love that book, especially if you are somebody who has no idea what a boundary is in the first place. This book is going to get you there. Because I want to be really honest with you. Up until that point, I didn't think I had a boundary issue. Now, silly me, hindsight is 20/20, my friends. But as I started reading through that book, I realized something a bit uncomfortable. I wasn't bad at time management. I was really bad at boundaries. In fact, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't even really understand what a boundary was in that moment. I thought a boundary meant being harsh and cutting people off or being selfish, which I think a lot of us feel that way. But what I started to see both through what I was reading and through daily prayer was that boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about taking responsibility for what God has entrusted you with, your energy, your body, your time, your presence, all those things you're entrusted to take care of. I had been saying yes to everything and everyone without ever asking, what did I need? The hard truth is no one else was going to protect my time for me. Not because they didn't care, not because they were taking advantage of me. My child truly cannot take advantage of me, right? At a year old. But because they didn't know. They were asking based on what I had always allowed. And I had unknowingly taught everyone around me that I had no problem putting my needs last. That I was the yes girl. That was hard for me to sit with. But it was also incredibly freeing because it meant that I wasn't stuck here. It meant I actually had more control than I thought. And that's when things started to change. Now, it wasn't overnight and it was far from perfect, but I did get intentional and I started setting boundaries with work, with my daughter's activities, yes, with my husband, and even with my time at home. And for the first time in a really long time, I wasn't just reacting to life anymore. I was the person in control of it. Well, God was and will always be on the throne, but you guys get my point here. And once I realized that, once I stopped believing that my schedule was something that just happened to me, I had to decide what I was actually going to be doing differently. I realized that every time I was saying yes to everyone else, I was quietly saying no to myself. And for a long time, I had convinced myself that this made me a good mom and a good wife and a good employee. And sure, it probably did to some degree, but I was only showing up as half of myself. What I finally saw was that constantly overexerting myself, it wasn't loving. It was exhausting. And exhausted Faith wasn't able to serve her people well. Now, I want to be really practical here because boundaries don't live in theory, right? It's great. We can say that we need them. We'll think about doing them. We have a thought here. I'm going to put a boundary in place. Boundaries live in real conversations. You cannot be mad at somebody for not respecting your boundary if they have no idea what that boundary is. That is very important. Boundaries live in these real conversations, real decisions, and sometimes, yes, very uncomfortable moments. For me, boundaries look like sitting down with my husband and actually explaining why this mattered to me, why I needed 30 minutes to myself. I didn't come at it in a place of blaming or accusing, but instead I said, I need to take better care of myself so I can show up for you and our daughter better. It looked like reevaluating work and making hard financial decisions, cutting out expenses so I didn't have to work 4 jobs. That wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I was burnt out on all ends. I needed that time back mentally and physically, and it meant that I would have to let one of those jobs go. It looked like putting time on my calendar that was non-negotiable. Time that wasn't for errands, it wasn't for cleaning the house, it wasn't for catching up. That time was specifically for me. And here's what surprised me. The world didn't fall apart. My daughter was okay. My marriage was great. Work figured it out. And slowly, as I started honoring that time, things really did start to shift in my life because I started sleeping better, which meant I had more energy during the day. That meant I was more patient, more present, and more efficient. I wasn't snapping as much. I wasn't constantly overwhelmed. I wasn't perfect by any means, but I was better. And the best part of it all is I wasn't giving less to the people I loved. I was giving them a better version of me. Boundaries didn't take something away from my family. They protected my ability to show up for them in the long term, for the things that truly, truly mattered. And this is where I want to pause, because if you're listening to this and maybe you're nodding along, chances are you've told yourself the same story I did, that there's no room for you right now, that you'll get to yourself later, that this is just a season you're in. I want you to hear this clearly. Your schedule isn't the problem, and neither is your family, your job, or your responsibilities. The real issue is that you've been trying to take care of yourself only after everything else is handled. And you're learning that that moment never comes. There is no extra time. You will always find something that needs your time. And if you give it to that, there will never be time for you. You don't need more hours in the day, because trust me, if I gave you more hours, if I could magically give you more hours, you would just fill them with more things to do for other people. What you really need is you need permission to protect the hours that you already have. And that permission doesn't come from your husband, your kids, or your boss. It comes from you. Only you can decide that. Boundaries don't have to be dramatic. They don't require a full life overhaul. They start with one honest decision to stop treating your needs like they're optional. That might look like putting one non-negotiable block on your calendar this week. It might look like having one uncomfortable conversation with your family over the holidays. Or it might simply look like noticing where you're saying yes out of guilt instead of alignment. And I know that can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to being the one who always makes it work. If you've been waiting for life to slow down before you take care of yourself, I want to lovingly tell you what I wish someone would have told me back then. That season may never come. And the good news is that doesn't mean you're stuck. It just means it's time to do things differently. Taking back control of your schedule doesn't start with fixing everything. If you've been here around any length of time, you know I'm never going to tell you to do it all at once, overnight. What I am going to tell you is to start small. Start with deciding that you matter enough to be on your own calendar. Not someday, not when things calm down. Right now, right in the middle of real life, in the midst of chaos. You don't need to overhaul your entire routine or suddenly become someone who has it all figured out. This also doesn't mean that you say no to everything and everyone. If it's important to you, if it matters to you, there's room for those yeses. You don't have to be the person that shuts everybody out. You just have to know when it's appropriate to do so. You just need to start with one habit, one protected moment, one small decision that says, I'm no longer waiting for permission to take care of myself. Grant that for yourself. Give yourself that permission. I can tell you you have permission, but it won't mean anything if you don't believe it. You have to give it to yourself. That's exactly why I created the One Habit Away Challenge. It's not about doing more, pushing harder, or adding another thing to your plate. It's about helping you build that habit of honoring yourself in a way that actually fits your life. Even when it's busy and unpredictable and imperfect, which life so often is all of those things. If you've felt stuck, overwhelmed, or like your health keeps getting pushed to the bottom of your list, this challenge gives you a simple, supported way to start doing things differently. No more waiting for the perfect season, no pressure to get it right. The best part is that the One Habit Away Challenge is yours completely free. So if you want to get your hands on that, head on over to IamOneHabitAway.com, or you can grab that link in the show notes, because you don't need a calmer life to take care of yourself. You need a better system and the willingness to believe that you are worth showing up for in the now, in the mess, in the chaos. Give yourself that permission. Again, I am ready to walk alongside you and make that happen with a firm foundation. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. And as always, stay beautiful.